Thanks, everybody, for joining us again this week for a better conversation. This is going to be the first episode we actually have in the series where we're talking about the key issues that are going to be before the Texas legislature during this session. One of the big key issues that Governor Abbott has highlighted is school choice. And so we have a wonderful guest with us today, Summer, who is going to be able to tell us her viewpoint on school choice, ask some interesting questions. We were just talking. She's read the bills forwards and backwards, so is going to be able to provide a great perspective. As always, we're also joined by producer Kyle. But Summer, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience and telling us a little bit about your background?
I would love to. Well, thank you for offering me to come on. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this because I feel like it is such a hot topic right now, and there's so much conversation that it's hard to kind of think about where you stand personally on it. But I am the proud mom of 2 sets of twin daughters, and I have been very active in the public school system since 2003. I have not had a break because I had 13-year-olds and then I had newborns. So I have gone right from college back to kindergarten. So I've been able to kind of look at things from a kind of unique perspective, 22 years in school as a parent. But I got very active in 2020. And I have a daughter in special education, and we were in Frisco ISD at the time, and everything was just kind of brought to the surface. And so for me, it kind of was my activation to pay attention to what was going on. And having a daughter in special ed, she was not given the services that she was due. And so that's kind of what started my fight, and ended up in a lawsuit against Frisco ISD. And then so it's been kind of an interesting journey, we'll say, with public schools. So I have a very unique perspective.
Well, and it's also my understanding that you do some really great work in the anti-trafficking space. Would you mind talking about that a little bit? Mostly because I want to be able to plug that work, so if people that are listening are inspired, they can support the work that you're doing.
Well, I work for Yaku Williams Ministries. We are an anti-human trafficking organization, and I am the director of communications. So I do a bunch of different things, but I have been there for almost 2 years, and it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve in this capacity. The Lord just brought me into this. I've had a heart for women and children, and my own personal story and family issues. I'm sure it's kind of always one of the things that leads people to do what we do. And so I absolutely love that I'm able to fight for women and children and to shed awareness and light on what's really going on behind the scenes, and to be able to advocate for better laws and legislation that will protect our kids, especially, being that I have 4 of them. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think a lot of people really understand how, truly, horrifically, that Dallas is one of the major hubs of trafficking, people, drugs, anything like that. I represent law enforcement in my day job as an attorney, and I know how much basically pressure is put on a lot of our surrounding municipalities to do sort of anti-trafficking interdiction, because the city of Dallas and the DPD for many, many years did nothing. And I hope that's changing somewhat. I hear there are rays of hope on that front, but just truly horrible stuff that comes through here.
It's been very eye-opening to me. I knew we had a problem. I knew that obviously, it's after the Sound of Freedom that really started to spark conversation, and people were really talking about what was going on. But I think that with the border situation, it's really opened the eyes of our communities to how close it is to our children, to us. It's everywhere now. So it's a big fight, but I believe that we're going to win in the end. So
that's great. Well, again, we could probably spend a whole podcast, a week's worth of podcast, on the work that JVN does in the anti-trafficking space. I know one of the board members for Better Dallas, Tammy Brown Rodriguez, is on the front lines fighting with y'all, and we're very proud of the work that she does, and we're appreciative of her making the introduction to you so that you could join us here today to talk about our focus, which is school choice today. And I wanted to, I guess, start off, I think for our audience, we've talked about school choice in some of our past episodes, generally that it's something that the governor has made a priority. We've talked a little bit about SB2, but you're really the first guest that we've had with any level of expertise on it. So from the outset, when people talk about school choice, what does that mean? Like for our audience to understand, like what does school choice really mean?
Well, I mean, I'll be really honest, I am not an expert. I'm just a mom who obviously this became something that I wanted to know more about because I do have a daughter in special education and I did have to fight to try to get services for her. So when I hear choice, I think of choice. I think you have a choice to choose where your child would go to school and where, the funds would go and whatnot. And that is, for me, the word choice should never even be in this. It's kind of gaslighting because it's not really choice. It's private school or homeschool choice, kind of. So it's, I don't know why the word choice is in there, but I think they do that to get people to think that it's going to be a choice that you can send your kid to the school that you want to, and it's not at all.
So with the idea that the students or parents would have these ESA accounts that would allow them to pay to send their kids to different schools, from your perspective, how does that not provide for choice? I mean, that's the common argument in favor of it. From your perspective, how does that not provide choice?
Well, first of all, it's only 100,000 ESAs, and there's 6.5 million students in Texas and over 775,000 that are in special education programs. So this is 100,000. And what's interesting to me is that it's only for private school, for homeschooling, and then some therapies and outside tutoring and whatnot. So when I was thinking this, I really thought it would be public schools where, there was a better public school that I wanted to send my daughter to because I knew they had a better, occupational therapy program. I would be able to do that. And you can't. This is not for public schools. This is only for people who want to pull their children out of public education, which I totally get, and then move them into a private school, homeschool them, or have extra therapies or whatnot.
Okay, that's actually a unique perspective that I haven't heard talked about before. I'm going to get into that. One thing I just want to make sure that our audience is clear, when you talk about the only 100,000 ESAs, are you referencing SB2?
Yes, and SB3 is totally, or HB3 is totally different.
Okay, so I want to get into the weeds of that a little bit more later as we progress in the conversation.
Sure.
But I just want to make sure that our audience is clear with what we're talking about. Now, what would be, so I guess my first question would be, do you have an opposition to the idea of taking this ESA money for use in private school or homeschool?
Absolutely not. I think it's fantastic, and if a parent wants to do that. But here's the problem in my situation. And again, this is not for everybody, but the reason I think having where I'm coming from is different is because my daughter is supposed to be at the top of that list because it is for children with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that private schools are not mandated to accept her. And most private schools do not offer special education because it's not funded. I mean, IDEA, which is what funds special education in public schools, is a federal program. And so they don't have that. So to have the specialized teachers, to have the accommodations, it's a strain on a private school. So my daughter more than likely would not get into a private school. She has learning disabilities and she's on a IEP, not just a 504, but an IEP, which is an individualized program or plan. So she's in a very different bracket. And when I read that and did some, studying into how that works, they are not mandated to take special education children.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest feedbacks right there, was that it's dedicated to the people that you said, but realistically, how many private schools are going to have the ability to do that? Special education obviously is going to be a lot less students per classroom, and the only way to make a business model out of it is to put 20 or so students in a classroom and turn some kind of profit. Maybe a lot. There'll be charter schools and private schools that are nonprofits, but that right there, I think, is probably the biggest objection, and also kind of the biggest unanswered question of, well, how is this? How are we going to really make this work? We're kind of just moving into the fog of the unknown there.
Well, it's interesting. I've asked several legislators, and not one of them has answered my question. And another thing, for example, we moved to a much more rural part of Texas. We left Frisco, and we decided that we were, going to give our children a little bit of a different experience, and we moved to more of a country. We have one high school, one junior high, 2 elementary schools. So we don't have private schools around the corner. And I think that's another thing, is that, you've got X amount of schools, but how many are private? And so that was one of my concerns. Is so I'm going to have to, if I chose to do this, I would have to find a school, which would probably be somewhere in Fort Worth. And so you're, driving, and there's just little things that go into it. So again, those were the questions and the concerns I had. But my daughter is not just going to get into any school.
So that's my mom is a special populations, that's what they call it in her district, teacher in New Mexico. And so I'm somewhat familiar with, we talked about the IDEA and the IEPs and everything along those lines. But I wanted to make sure that our audience understands as well. Would you mind just in an overview explain, especially from a parent's perspective, what an IDEA or an IEP is for students?
So my daughter is on the autism spectrum, but I am very proud to say she is in 7th grade. And this is the first year where she is in all gen ed classes, and she is doing amazing, but she does have an individualized education plan. And that means that we have had multiple psychologists and specialists that have evaluated her, and along with the public school teachers, special education teachers, speech therapists, occupational therapists. It takes a village, literally. And so we all come together and we create an individualized plan for her specifically. So the accommodations that she will get throughout the year. And it is based off of testing and where she's at socially, and just all the different things that, we go through, where her twin sister, completely different. She's in, gen ed. In fact, she's in gifted talented. So it's complete different spectrum there. But with Haley, there are funds that are given to the district to accommodate her. And because she has an IEP, those are evaluated every year, and the monies are, given annually to make sure that she has her speech therapy or she has XYZ. Mm-hmm. So that, that's a concern, what's going to happen with, it's all kind of up in the air right now.
So is there a fear or from you or the kind of the group that is, because there's a lot of talk out there about the school choice thing. Are you concerned that with this school choice, it will take away from special education in Texas?
Honestly, no, because where are our kids going to go?
Right.
it would be really hard to homeschool her. I mean, I guess maybe a little bit, but again, my whole thing is that these children are more than likely not going to be able to get into these schools. So, I mean, I know that's a big fear, but I don't know how, eventually maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like right now, the way that it's set up, again, I just don't know how many of these kiddos are going to be accepted into private schools.
So you were talking earlier about school choice with regard to being able to send your child to a different public school. Is that something you would want to see added to the current legislation, or what's
So
your ask there?
I feel like this is lipstick on a pig. I think for 20 years, the Republican Party of Texas has been talking about education. And for 20 years, you know, it's a great selling point when you're running for a political seat.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't seen much action. Our schools have gotten worse. And there's more money. It's always money is thrown at everything, but nothing is fixed. And I don't know if it's just that they don't want to fix it because they like the money and having problems creates more need for money, or if it's just that they really don't know how to do it, that it's too far broken. But I don't believe it is. I believe that it's people going in and auditing money and financial things. Like what's really going on here? And I completely understand the whole choice thing, and I think it's great to, you know, give $10,000, but $10,000 is not going to cover private education, at
Right.
least in Texas,
Yeah.
and here. So parents are still going to have to pay the remainder, which could be, you know, I'm sure I was looking, some are $12,000, some are up to $35,000. So again, this target group isn't probably going to have all that extra money to pay for private school. And when we say choice, I already have a choice. And I don't know if I've already said this, but that's what kind of cracks me up with this is that I do have a choice to homeschool. I do have the choice to do charter school or do private school. So the choice is there. This isn't school choice. Truly, because if, like I said, if school choice was what it was, I do think it would be, you could go down to, you know, Weatherford Junior High School, or, you know, if I wanted to drive all the way back to Frisco ISD, I should be able, you know, that to me is a choice. That's opening up, you know, the word choice to parents. And this is not at all what it is.
Right, so would you like to see that ability added to the current structure where you would have the ability to, from a school choice standpoint, say, okay, well, I might live in this district, but I would like the money that would normally go to this district, that I would like that to follow my child to go to this other school district.
Yes, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like every school should have everything it needs and should be amazing. There's no excuse. Our schools should be safe. Our schools should be funded. We have so much money in education in the state of Texas. There is no reason that we should have to go to a different district. Every single school should be able to accommodate its children. It should know its community. It should know the demographic, what the needs are, and it should be able to accommodate. That is, to me, that's what we should be aiming for. But if we can't do that because the people that are running the show are clowns, then yes, I do believe that the money should follow the child.
Okay.
In public school.
But would you disagree with the money following the child to a private school or the homeschool? So
No, I don't disagree with this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with this at all. I disagree with how it's written and that it isn't for all students. It should be for all. It's 5 or 6.5 million students in Texas, especially special education. That's, again, if we're going to talk about the money, yes, the money should follow the child. If they want that money to help go to private school, absolutely it should. And I do think it would be good to make public school a little more competitive and up their ante, but it's not. It's for 100,000, and who are those children? How do you choose
Yeah,
that money?
but I'm with you on that. So, because part of my background is that I also grew up in part in two very, very rural school districts. I went to middle school for the most part in Ponder, Texas,
Yeah.
which is again one of those. It was actually one school, like the high school, the junior high were the same building, and the elementary school shared a parking lot, right? I mean, we were all there together. And I ended up homeschooling my 8th grade year because, public school, like, I love Ponder ISD, but, I was sort of an outlier and I was not being challenged in school. And I needed that because, I wasn't behaving as well as I probably should have as a middle schooler. And then I went to, huh?
I said, but look at you now.
Well, you really have to ask if I've gotten Kyle probably is shaking his head right now. I didn't see, but he's definitely shaking his head. And then I went to this little school called Callisburg for high school, which is another one, one elementary, one middle school, one high school. So for me, to your point earlier about being in the rural communities, there was 2 private schools that I could have gone to. Now, one of them I probably would have cajoled my way into if we had the money. And I mean, we were living in a trailer on a dirt road, so we had no money for private school. But that's sort of, for me, the interesting thing, and I'd be, where you live now, is the argument that, well, if there was the option to move kids to private schools, that might incentivize the creation of more private schools.
Absolutely.
And if we have rural students that have a desire to maybe go to like a religious school, right, a Catholic school or an Episcopal school or fill in the blank there, maybe the ESA money might help incentivize creating more of those. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I love that. And, having a daughter who is incredibly talented, like she's very smart. And school can tend to be a little boring for her. I mean, it's not as challenging. And I think that, again, we stick every child in a box and we expect that, and I mean, I can go down rabbit holes with my whole conspiracies on what school really is doing to our kids, but I absolutely think it would be amazing to have more private schools for music, kids that are in theater. Like, there's just, every child learns differently, and yet we want to just have them all as kind of robots, and I hate that. So I would love to see that, and I actually wrote that down. What if we were able to see that there is a need for more private schools, or not even private schools, but just, catering to a certain child's brain, if you will, and letting them flourish and grow. I think it would be the best thing that we could do as a society for our kids.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I've seen happen a little bit more, especially because of COVID, are sort of the homeschool co-ops.
Love
where you have like parents in a neighborhood coming together, hiring a teacher for their 10 students, maybe at varying ages, and then just having that sort of be the educational environment.
And that was actually another question that I had is, reading the bill and looking at, there are certain requirements that have to be met in order to receive the funds. Does that mean a licensed teacher in the state of Texas, we could do that, and we could hire teachers to come in, do the co-op, and, pay her from our ESAs, like if she's qualified, because, right. I mean, it definitely doesn't say you can't, but it doesn't clarify exactly. So, I mean, I think, again, it's being creative with it, but I also want to make sure that it's, not going to be taken advantage of in certain ways. And that the money is being accounted for, and, it's, because I feel like, just giving one person control over all this can be, especially right now.
Oh, for sure. And that's sort of the next kind of topic that I wanted to jump into, like, great segue. one of the things amongst Republicans that is often the biggest point of contention with school choice, or however you want to brand it, is the idea of, is it no strings attached, or are there strings attached to the money? There's a debate over whether or not we want to have some sort of approved list of vendors, approved list of accredited schools, or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, I kind of see it as as a competition between two different conservative values. One of them being freedom of choice, right? You parents, you get to choose how you educate your children. But on the other side, there's also being, responsible with taxpayer dollars, and not just throwing money out there to be spent however. So how do you sort of view that give and take?
I don't know. That is kind of over my head. When we start talking about the math, because I even tweeted something, I was like, the math is not mathing for me, because I don't get it.
Well, if we set the math aside and we're just talking about like whether or not there should be what sort of oversight, or should there be any oversight about how the money is spent?
Absolutely, there should be oversight, just because, there has to be something. But then again, it's, now you're getting more government into private schools and into homeschooling, and I don't want that for them. And because I do wear a tinfoil hat, I have looked at some of the strings that people are worried about, and I will be honest, I am a little concerned about eventually what this could lead to for those homeschool families. Because again, freedom should be freedom. You should be able to choose your curriculums. You should be able to choose, that's the beauty of homeschooling, and it needs to be there. And I don't want that to be touched. I really don't. I will fight for that one.
So actually, let's unpack that a little bit. You talked about there being particular strings that people are concerned about. What are those strings?
Well, testing, and again, that was my question, is how are they just going to give money, and it's just, there you go, on a silver platter. My daughter doesn't get that. Like, we have to do all kinds of testing and all kinds of surveys, although I opt her out of, a lot of stuff, but, obviously we have to test her to see where she's at, to make sure, we don't need to add services or take services away. How would a private school be able to get around that if they take a child with special needs?
Yeah.
I just think,
should they get around that? Like, as a parent of a student with disabilities, right? Wouldn't you want them to continue to have to do those tests to make sure that they're providing adequate services or the right services for your daughter?
yes, but if it's a private school and they don't want to, and they don't want to have to be, if they want to do things differently, I think they should be able to. And that would be my fear. And that would be if I was an administrator of a private school, or if I was a homeschool parent, I would not want to take federal dollars at all. I would want to stay as far away from that as I could. Because to me, that's the second you're giving them an inch, and then we all know what happens from there.
Yep.
And I also very much worry about like the whole digital. And if you look at some of these the donors that are behind this, it's a digital world.
What do you mean by digital? Like a digital curriculum, or is that what you're talking about?
Now, books are going to be yesterday, which they almost already are, but there's a big issue with just digital learning, and not every child, mine included, it's really hard for her to learn on a laptop and not to, have a tangible book and to comprehend. And so what are we doing? We're, like we talked about, which is why I think innovative schools, and going back, if a school's like, we're not going to have anything digital, fine, sign me up. I want my kids there. I want my kids in the dirt. I want my kids to, be able to learn on how their brain is. And so right now, everything is just, it's like the teacher is there to babysit. They are being taught by a digital platform, and that to me is just so detrimental. for their little brains.
To me, it's that, but it's also, I mean, Ray Bradbury, when writing Fahrenheit 451, or when you're talking about 1984, like, man, they couldn't have even imagined how you don't even need to burn the books like in Fahrenheit 451, because you can just change a few lines of code, and all of a sudden it's entirely different. I mean, that's something that deeply concerns me about a move towards not just in the classroom, but like, yeah, you don't need to buy books. Put it on your Kindle.
Yep.
Because how easy it is at that point. I mean, I read something that, like, what was it, Roald Dahl's estate sat there and had some of his works rewritten for the modern age. So it's like, if you don't have the original copy of, whatever, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory on paper, you'll never know how they monkeyed it.
And they can change history. They can change anything. But I also think, too, I think it's good. Obviously, I always want our schools to go in the direction of, obviously, the workforce, because that's another one of my things, is that, they're educating our children for the next workforce. What do they want? Well, clearly it's very digital. It's AI, it's coding, it's that. But that's for a certain group of children. That is not for every student. Some kids are hands-on. They need, like me, like I need to print everything out and read it. Even though it's right here, I need to read it. And that just is going away. And so I can see, again, now when I start talking about it, then I'm like, yes, this is great. But then I'm like, wait a sec. But then again, it's not as good as it should be. I think it needs to be completely overhauled. I think parents need to be very involved in being able to help write this, because we are going to be affected by it. The taxpayer is, but this is just an interesting. I feel like it was just very sloppy. It was like, just get something out there, hurry it up, and this is what we got. And if you oppose it, you're a Democrat. Well, no, I'm just a mom who's very concerned about my own child and that our community of special needs kids.
So Kyle, you've been unusually quiet. Maybe the format somewhat causes that with 3 people on a Zoom or on a Google Meet. You're a parent. What are your sort of parental concerns? Like, taking your political hat, like, how do you see the school choice stuff and a lot of the issues that were brought up affecting your kids?
Yeah, so first off, I agree with a lot of the things that you pointed out as either unanswered questions that I think they purposely don't want to answer. They just kind of want to let it play out and see how it goes, because they don't really know. They don't really know how it's going to go, which I think kind of leads back. You mentioned something that it doesn't cover all the kids. I think that, in my understanding, the people that put it together, that was kind of the point. They wanted to start with a really small amount and just kind of see what the issues are going to be, because there's undoubtedly going to be issues changing this school, changing how we do in schooling. But like you, I have my son has an individualized education plan. Now for him, it's more behavior, which obviously affects the test scores and stuff. So one test will be way up here, the next one will be bottomed out, and it's just because he said, I'm not going to do it. So it's hard to track. But yes, that is a concern that, hey, the private schools, let's say we go find a very nice Montessori or something like that that's within striking range of this $10,000 voucher, wherever it ends up, and they just say yes, and then a couple weeks later, like, hey, Dennis the Menace has got to go. And I'm like, and it's a private school, it's a private business or organization. Yes, like, you just have to say, okay, I'm with you. I don't think that mandating that they have to accept this or that is going to be good. Fundamentally, from where I stand politically, I don't think that's good, but also I think that would hinder the growth of the industry to open up more options in the marketplace. If you immediately say, kind of like the insurance, you can keep your doctor's Obamacare. If you have to take people with pre-existing conditions, that's kind of what this is. I think if we stifle that too early, everyone will say, "Well, see, private schools, school choice failed. Let's go back to what we have." And what we have, like you said, is it's failing. And where it's failing, and whose fault is it, and how do we fix it? That's there's a million different opinions on that.
One thing I do think, and I've talked about this with a group of moms for so long, but we briefly lived in Seattle, Washington, and my daughter was able to get into a school, which it was incredible. And it was a public funded school, but it was for kids with special needs, but it also took, they call them typicals. And so, but it was, I mean, you walked into this school and like I still get emotional over it. It was beautiful. It had everything. It had every bell, every whistle. The teachers were incredible, and this was in Seattle. It had the top psychologist. I mean, it had the occupational therapy room. I wanted to go play. I was like, this is amazing. It had tactile. It had a garden. It had everything you could imagine for wheelchairs, children who were nonverbal, the cafeteria. I was like, yes, sign me up. Seriously, the school was incredible. Took us nothing. My daughter got in. She had her eye, like everything. And then her twin also got to go and be typical and, model behavior and all that. And it was an amazing opportunity. And I have no idea why we don't have more of those. Because then it would help even children with dyslexia or whatever it is. But we really, I mean, to me, it's like, I wish we could talk about that with our legislators. Why aren't we willing to do this? If we're willing to put these kids at the top of the list here and give $10,000, why don't we invest that in an amazing school in different areas, have high-end transportation, and really do it the right way?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, yeah. Call it private, I don't know, but there's a lot we could do with that one.
So that reminds me, I think this, in my opinion, is in part where everything being bigger in Texas is a struggle, in that we have these great big cities, which, in my opinion, I don't think any of them do a good job with public education.
Great.
And then but then on the other side, we have these very small communities that are spread out that make it difficult to sort of have enough people to be able to have a program like this, or to be able to do much specialization in really any regard. I mean, if you're out in you're out in the Panhandle, it's hard to have a music academy because how many students that really need to devote themselves to that? I mean, I think that's a struggle, almost like a geographic struggle that we have sometimes in Texas. Because here in Dallas, I used to be a part of on a board of a thing called the National Academy Foundation, and a lot of what we did was sort of college prep, but also career prep. We had a hospitality program that students could do where they were basically running a restaurant, right? They were running a small restaurant in the school. We had a finance and entrepreneur program. We had a robotics program. We had a health and human services program where they're basically like learning how to be, EMS. We had all sorts of stuff like that where we were getting accreditation, they were getting licensing and all that sort of stuff to the school so they could step out and not necessarily have to go to college, right? Step into more of a trade school or step into apprenticeship or something along those lines. But the problem was, we had this program in this one little pocket of Dallas. There was another school that had this program in another pocket of Dallas, both public schools, but nowhere else. And there was no ability for people in other parts of the city to come to these areas. And I think that goes back to one of your initial things as far as the inelasticity of setting up the school zones and not allowing students to go to different places. Because that would be, right? I mean, ideally, if you're in the city of Dallas and I don't know how many schools there are, but let's say there's I don't know, 20 high schools. I don't know what the number is. I probably should. With that many schools, you should be able to have some of that specialization that you're talking about, right? This is sort of your art magnet school, and this is your, more of your like trades magnet school, and these are more of your just typical Renaissance types of, education schools. But this whole locking students into like their zip code kind of defeats the ability to try that, in my opinion.
In Frisco, this is an interesting situation. So there were two in our area, two middle schools, and we asked for a transfer, an inter-district transfer to go across the street because the middle school that my daughters were supposed to go to was actually further away, and this one's literally, it was right across the street, and I just dropped them off. They said no, absolutely not. Go ahead. It's across the street. They're like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, this is bizarre. We're done.
Who sets policy for that? Is that a school district policy, or is that a part of the education code? Where does that come from?
From what I understand from Frisco, it was Frisco's policy, and they, I think they were just very mad at me because I had just taken them to court. But I do want to say something though. That was a huge district with a lot of money. And I moved out to Parker County and Azle ISD. I was a little nervous because, again, we moved specifically to Frisco for this, large, amazing school district, and that wasn't quite the case. But this small little town of ours my daughter is flourishing. Her team is incredible, and I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know. But I mean, again, I'm so thankful that I don't have to worry about this as much. But in Frisco, I would have worried. In Frisco, I would have absolutely wanted to use this, and I may not have been able to. So I think that's where my heart comes from. And, I completely, and I really want to reiterate that I completely understand why parents think this is a great idea. But I just, again, I just don't know how this is going to work for certain kiddos.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things about your perspective it struck me is it's almost sort of the perspective of if anybody sees school choice as the silver bullet to cure education, no. It might be a patch in the quilt, but there's a lot else that needs to be done as well.
Yeah, it does. And I think the TEA is a big deal in Texas, and I think that you kind of have to start with the head of the snake and go down, and that's a whole other podcast. But just from a mom, I'm sad in ways because I really do think that our education system is failing our children. But is that done on purpose? I don't know. Because they have everything they need. They have more money than they've ever had. And yet our children are more illiterate. There's so many questions about why are we in this position with what we have right in front of us. And it just makes me, again, tinfoil hat, but
well, here's my
that's by design.
I think you hit on this earlier, and this was my experience also. I think some of our rural schools are doing a great job.
Amazing.
I think part of
Shout out to Azle ISD.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Azle ISD, look, Callisburg ISD, where I went, Ponder ISD, it was a me thing, not a you thing, for me having homeschool. But look, and honestly, part of my opinion on it is a lot of these smaller schools, if you end up in Azle as a teacher, it's because you really want to be a teacher.
Amen.
Right? I feel like some of these big, huge school districts, just their staffing requirements, sometimes you don't end up with the most passionate teachers. And I'm saying this, and I won't name, but my mom complains about this stuff in her school district, which isn't big. But you talk about the TEA and the fact that how much the teachers union protects a lot of these people, and some of the just, I don't know, I think insane policies that schools start promoting because that's what the teachers union wants.
100%.
and it just has nothing to do with educating the kids. And so honestly, and I'm a natural born contrarian, if those, anybody that knows me, the fact that the TEA dislikes the school choice stuff so much actually makes me love it a little bit more.
I know, me too, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, well.
That's part of it for me. Like, I think our teachers are great. I love our teachers. I love people that are willing to commit to educating our children. But I love the people that are committed to educating our children and not the people that want a union job and have summers off.
That's right. Well, and nowadays you really have to love teaching children because it's almost like you're putting your life at risk. Like you just never know.
Yeah.
And that, again, that goes back to, I mean, why aren't we addressing those issues? And why are we just throwing this bill, which, Greg Abbott, let's be honest, he's run on school choice for many a years. And then all of a sudden we've got all these other issues. And this is the most important one. And the bill isn't even, I'm sorry, it's just crap. And I am all for choice and I am all for, more private schools and like we talked about, but to me, this was rushed. There is something nefarious behind this, the way it was rolled out, the way it's been shoved down our throats, the way it's almost like they're trying to divide us. And I don't like that because I really think that there needs to be anybody who doesn't question this clearly hasn't read it. And I think that everybody should take the time to read it and then go to their legislators and their reps and say, look, I need you to ask these questions or at least answer them. And those of you who are watching who haven't answered me, you know who you are.
And this is what I want to get to because we're coming towards the end of our hour together, and I want to have you tee that up for people that want to make those calls and ask those questions because we are still early enough in the session, and the fact that the House hasn't passed the bill, and whatever the House passes is going to have to reconcile with the Senate. So we're still a long ways away from having a final answer, if you will, even if we are going to have a school choice bill passed in session. Kind of help us bullet point this. What do you want parents to know? What do you want them to be? What questions do you want them to be asking? Where do you see the big holes in SB2?
Well, it's not a one size fits all, and neither are children. And so that's a big thing to me. They don't guarantee equal access, obviously, my daughter being one of those. I say research and see if it's a good fit for your child, but also I really feel like it's time for us to start pushing that public schools need to be reformed. And we need to start putting that first instead of just let's throw all this money at something else. Let's take that money and let's make our public schools great because we can. I know we can, especially Texas. But I would say just make it real. Like contact your reps, send an email, make a phone call, and just be very honest with them. And even if you have questions like me, like I literally had 3 questions. I got 2, one of them answered by one person. A couple of people just ignored me. And then somebody chose not to answer the one about special ed at all. Like, just blew me off. That's annoying.
A quick question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to, I kind of put it on the side earlier, but what would you think about, a change to the bill it passed that sort of an opt-in, opt-out for schools? So if you're a private school, you have the ability to either opt in or opt out of the school choice program. But if you decide that you're going to opt in and you're going to take those dollars, you can't deny students for disabilities or anything along those lines.
But that sets up a whole other thing because if they're going to take federal funds,
Or not federal funds, we're talking about just the state money, right? The ESA meeting.
Okay. Well.
So like if you're going to be a school that participates in Texas's school choice, and you're going to take that $10,000 ESA for students, if you opt in, you can't deny students based upon disability. And another thing, and Kyle, this goes to something that you said earlier, what if there was a requirement that once you take that money, you cannot, that student is there for the semester, that student is there for the year, right? Just like if you were a public school. If you're going to take the public dollar, you can't say, oh, Johnny's not behaving, we're going to, go take him somewhere else. What do y'all think about those sort of ideas? I know I only have a few minutes left, but as sort of,
Start.
if you will.
I think it's a good start of a conversation on how that will look. Absolutely.
Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, those are really good things to throw out there. We haven't even brought that up before, so that's really good. Yeah, I agree with you again. It's like that sounds cool, but now we're talking about more oversight and just more state involvement, and I feel like it can get very nefarious with, for instance, I mean, there's vested interest in, for instance, like the teachers union. I mean, they're fighting tooth and nail to not have this. So who are the regulators that are going to, be enforcing it? It's a very, very touchy issue, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. And it should be. Honestly, I think it's good. I'm happy to see that I wasn't the only one that was, I mean, it's definite, like I said, but it also can be very divisive. And I never want to go that route because I completely understand both sides. Like I am, I really do understand why people want this. But I go back to, we really need to look at why we're not fixing things, why our schools have been able to get this bad. Um, and then, we just keep promoting people.
Well, I think it's great that this is sparking that conversation, right? No matter what, the pushing of the school choice bill as being such a priority is making people talk about education in ways they haven't before. And I think that can only be a good thing for the future of our kids and how they're educated. I don't have any yet, but I hope the schools are great when I do, or any that are officially mine if I will, I'll just say. But, okay, well, Summer, I really appreciate you taking the time. Your passion comes through as a mother, but also for kids in general. Thank you for devoting the time today to humoring our questions, giving us your honest feedback.
You are awesome.
Again, for those of you that are listening, that are watching, go check out Yako Bullions Ministries. Check out what they're doing. It's amazing work. They could use your support. And then to Summer's point, ask questions about school choice, ask questions about education, get plugged in, because if there's something that you want to make an impact on, there's still time to do that. So, Summer, thank you for joining. For those of you that are listening, thanks for listening along, and hope to join you again for another better conversation.